What comes to mind when you think of serial killer movies? Is it the cold, calculated cunning of cannibal Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs? The mysterious mass murderer Michael Myers in Halloween? Or perhaps even Rick Moranis' would-be child cannibal and serial killer Wayne Szalinski? Well, maybe not that last one. Regardless of your answer, one thing's for sure, there's been no shortage of fictional serial killers for us to be terrified of. The mystery thriller genre is an industry giant that has long stood the test of time and remains relevant even to this day.
That's not what you think.
Perhaps what makes it so popular with audiences is that much like the characters in these films, we too crave answers and want to see the man behind the mask. So while there's no shortage of cinematic serial killers, here I'm going to focus on two movies based on some very real ones, Bong Joon-Ho's Memories of Murder and David Fincher's Zodiac. Funnily enough, if you were to mention David Fincher and serial killers to me, my mind would automatically jump to his 1995 thriller Seven, which I became aware of because of that infamous Brad Pitt scene.
What's in the box?
So when I discovered that he had made another serial killer movie with 2007's Zodiac, I needed no encouragement to watch it. Memories of Murder, on the other hand, is a film I most likely would not have discovered if not for Bong Joon-Ho's explosion in popularity after the release of his Best Picture winner Parasite in 2019. As I'm sure many others did, after watching that masterpiece, as well as seeing how downright likable Bong Joon-Ho came across in his Oscars speech, I wanted to see more of his work.
Thank you. I will drink until next morning. Thank you.
Memories of Murder and Zodiac are two of the finest the thriller genre has to offer, and due to the similar basic plot and high standing in the genre amongst critics, they are often compared when discussing great serial killer films. In this video, I will take a look at how the differences in cultural settings and directorial styles between the two films manifest themselves in the story and its characters. As mentioned before, both films are based on true stories of murders that took place in South Korea and North America respectively. Memories is based on the Hwaseong serial murders that took place between 1986 and 1991, while Zodiac is based on the Zodiac killings in Northern California, claiming 5 confirmed victims between 1968 and 69. However, while Zodiac takes a more factual approach, being based on Robert Graysmith's book and is set over a period of over 20 years, Memories of Murder is more loosely inspired by the true story of Korea's first confirmed serial murders, in which the killer targeted women, usually those who were walking outside alone at night. Rather than being set over the 5 years the actual murders took place, it takes a very in-the-moment approach, with the murders happening throughout the film over a short period of time. Both approaches vary, but achieve what they set out to do. Fincher's long-term storytelling, with time jumps scattered across the movie, gradually shows the effect the Zodiac case not being solved is having on those who were involved, whether by curiosity or obligation. Bong Joon-ho, meanwhile, puts us in the trenches with the detectives and allows us to witness their constant failings during the film, and the lack of answers frustrates not only the characters but the viewer as well. This helps us identify with them, as despite the flaws in the detectives' methods and their questionable morals, we cannot help but want them to succeed. So, how does the location dictate how the story plays out? In Zodiac, the murders take place in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is a highly populated region spanning the city of San Francisco. When the crimes are committed, the murderer himself is the one to report them. He contacts several newspapers, making himself and his crimes known, and even giving himself the name Zodiac. The film, taking place in a populated region with several prominent newspapers and an organized police force, creates an environment where it is plausible that the killer would seek attention. Whereas in Memories of Murder, the killings take place in a small town at night with the bodies all being hidden. Here the killer seeks no publicity, he is purely seeking victims to murder without any desire for attention. Moving on to the directorial styles, let's first look at Memories of Murder. What Bong Joon-ho does so creatively is the art of showing, not telling. Rather than having a character tell us that the police are not equipped to deal with these sorts of murders, Joon-Ho uses the first 10 minutes to convey this. First, Detective Park, played by frequent Joon-Ho collaborator Song Kang-ho, is on his own discovering a body, while at the same time trying to make a curious child get away from the crime scene. The lack of an organized police force there to close off the crime scene gives the feel of a small town. Then, at the scene of the next murder, while there is more of a police presence, Joon-Ho shows how hilariously out of their depth they are, with no forensics team on the scene yet, and a tractor running over what could have been the most important piece of evidence in the murder, a footprint. This sequence also sets up the introduction of another important character, Detective Seo from Seoul, a more professional detective who volunteered to help with the case. Memories of Murder also has the kills taking place throughout the film. We as viewers are placed in the detective's shoes as they try to solve the mystery behind these murders. By having the murders constantly ongoing, Joon-Ho also creates a great sense of urgency. We feel that the killer must be caught as soon as possible, otherwise more women may end up dead. Nowhere is this exemplified more than in the scene where they realize that the song Sad Letter is on the radio while it has started raining, which are the exact conditions in which the killer operates. In contrast, while Fincher does depict the murders in Zodiac with greater detail than Joon-Ho does, he takes a rather different approach. The last murder in the film takes place 26 minutes in, meaning there were no actual deaths for most of the movie's 157-minute runtime. Instead, what Zodiac does is that it shows the effects the seemingly impossible unsolved case has on its characters. It is partly also able to do this because the killer did continue to send letters after his last confirmed kill. Fincher makes the film focus on the case's impact on its characters over a number of years. He uses a number of time jumps in the film, with one even as long as 4 years. These were used to show both how our characters change with the passage of time, and yet, despite time moving forward, they were unable to, as the case still remained unsolved. The lead character of Zodiac, Robert Graysmith, is also the one who wrote the real-life book the film is based on. Being a cartoonist for the San Francisco Chronicle, he happened to be in the room when the first Zodiac letter was received, and from that moment forward, he was hooked. Graysmith spends much of the film chasing after answers, professing himself that he likes solving puzzles. But as we see over the passage of time, this becomes much more than a puzzle for him, taking over every aspect of his life. The film shows him get into a relationship, get married, and then again get divorced, all happening on the side while we jump from one update about the Zodiac case to the other. This lack of attention on his personal life represents how Graysmith's family was never his priority, and it suffered as a result, with his wife leaving him near the end of the film. In contrast to Graysmith, there is Detective Toschi, who more than anything else would like the case to be over with so that he can move on. Fincher's time jumps show exactly how he fails to do that, as we see him back at the crime scene of the last known Zodiac killing, symbolic of his inability to move forward. Then there's crime reporter Paul Avery, brought to life by the charismatic Robert Downey Jr. Avery begins the film as a confident, quick-witted reporter at the Chronicle. But over the course of the film, we see the Zodiac case begin to disrupt his life, which first begins when the Zodiac himself sends him a threatening letter. And with the passage of time, he loses his job at the Chronicle.
Are you okay?
No. Thank you for asking.
Turns to drugs and alcohol, and the last we see of him is when Graysmith visits him in his houseboat, which itself is symbolic of how his life has slowly sunk into nothingness. Bong Joon-Ho takes all three of his characters and memories of murder on journeys of change over the course of the film. Detective Park, as we meet him, is a brash, somewhat violent detective who claims to have this ability to look people in the eyes and read them, which he claims he will use to catch the murderer. His partner, Cho, is an even more violent detective who regularly beats confessions out of suspects, with one of his signature moves even being to dropkick the suspect, which Joon-Ho uses to an almost comedic effect. This element of almost slapstick humor in an otherwise dramatic story distinguishes it from Zodiac and serves to give the film a few light moments to cut the tension which the rest of the movie is filled with. The third member of their unceremonious trio is Detective Seo from Seoul, who is more professional in his methods. One main aspect of his character is his strong faith in documents, trusting them to always tell the facts. However, as the film reaches its climax and the detectives yet again fail to find the murderer, we see drastic changes in all three of their characters. First, after Cho drunkenly gets in a fight, he gets impaled with a rusty nail, which leads him to having his leg amputated. I guess he won't be dropkicking anyone anytime soon. Next, we see Seo triumphantly open the documents from America, which will seemingly confirm that the suspect in front of them is the killer. When this fails to be the case, as the documents prove inconclusive, we finally see him snap. A combination of seeing the student he had befriended earlier being killed and his frustration at not preventing it caused this pivotal moment where he loses his faith in documents, casting them aside when they fail him. And lastly, Detective Park tries his trusty eye contact method on the suspect, but even he is unsure, not having the same confidence in his abilities as he once did. Over the course of the film, we see each of them lose something pivotal to their character, which is captured beautifully by Bong Joon-Ho's storytelling. So, what do both these films have in common? Well, they're both serial killer movies based on true events, where the killer is never caught. Oh, and yeah, they're both fantastic films. Which one is better? Well, that's kind of an unfair question, because both films craft their own original stories that work in their respective locations. A story like Memories of Murder would not work in the location of San Francisco, where Zodiac takes place, because it is precisely the environment it takes place in that allows Memories to be the masterpiece it turned out to be. The same can be said for Zodiac taking place in a small town in South Korea. It would simply never work. So, rather than comparing them, settle in, get comfortable with the edge of your seat, and enjoy the brilliant movie magic of David Fincher and Bong Joon-Ho as two proud proponents of the mystery thriller genre.